Uh, for those of you who may not have met me, I'm Diane Hammonds. I'm the marketing manager here at ERP Suites. And I wanted to kick us off with just a little bit of an overview for anybody on the call who may not be familiar with ERP Suites and the work we do. So we are a comprehensive ERP services provider. Everything from cloud services, migrations, optimizations, through technical and functional managed services, consulting like upgrades, implementations, and special project work, through advisory practice, which includes our product development. Let's dig into advisory practice a little bit more. This is our group that's really hyper-focused on aligning technology with business goals, goals of gaining efficiency, improving customer service, increasing agility, and certainly managing risk for our customers. Mark Zink, our speaker today, is the Director of Advisory Practice, and he's going to walk us through document automation as one of our brainchilds that's come out of this practice. So Mark, I'll kick it off to you.
All right, thank you, Diane. Certainly appreciate the intro. As Diane kind of mentioned, as part of the advisory role that we perform at ERP Suites, we also have a role where we're looking out for emerging or even existing products that our customers will value as well as others. But more important, being able to position some of those products where it certainly makes the most sense, and where obviously companies can gain some momentum and some value in some of the more forward thinking, or at least forward opportunities. I think one of the elements that that we really want to speak to today is really, where do organizations find some of the whether it be image or document process automation, is where can they gain some efficiencies and improve their customer experience, obviously, and to some extent being able to do more with less, being more agile, as well as sort of manage some of the risk. So whether it's internal or external, it's pretty important for us to kind of continue to be that thought leadership that our customers expect, as well as what you're expecting from our products. So with that, next slide, Diane. All right, so where's your organization today, and to some extent, where is the industry? And some of the folks really in that first column that we're kind of identifying with the journey into more, if you will, intelligence and more automation. On that first, if you will, that first bucket is really around the transactional ERP system of record. What you see there is a majority of our clients today are really transacting and generally benefiting from integrated processes, integrated data, modules that speak to one another. And these kinds of solutions have been maturing in the marketplace for well over 20 years, if not more, considerably more. And so that's where we traditionally see a majority of our clients. Kind of moving up into that next level of where can you be on the journey is in that where your ERP package, whether it be JD Edwards or SAP or some of the others, where are you at in terms of taking advantage of say mobility, taking advantage of smaller apps or apps that reside on our handheld devices, or apps that reside out in the warehouse. IoT things such as shop floor integration. How often are you getting feedback from the shop floor, or from work orders, or from orders complete or shipped? Those things are kind of important. And to some extent, to what level have you either been vertically integrated with your suppliers or key customers? Whether that's something as volume or such as an EDI transaction, or maybe even a web service transaction. So that's where we would see a certain degree of ERP expertise that has emerged over really the last 10 years or so. What we're really talking about today is more of that third bucket, which is supervised ERP. And this is where we're looking for gaining some digital assistance, some virtual assistance, maybe even some assistance around decision making, being able to have either processes committed on our behalf and to some extent decisions committed to on our behalf. What I really like today is what we're really demonstrating or speaking to specifically is document automation. How can we take those document-based processes and turn those into valuable information? And how can we, if you will, take the people element of images and move that more into an assisted or a virtual assistant? As you move a little further along, ERP obviously can emerge even further along with machine learning, or where decisions are actually made on your behalf, where solutions are providing predictive capabilities, not only understanding what you did in the past, but what you'll be able to do, or at least be able to anticipate in the future. So this is where we're gaining more autonomy, or basically more automation, maybe even something such as an automated workflow, or approvals are done on your behalf, and you're simply attending to, if you will, a digital assistant or intelligent. So gaining deeper insights and deeper intelligence from the volumes and the transactions that we're producing either on the shop floor or through our supply chains or through our financial transactions. Next slide. That may have seemed like, if you will, on the spectrum of opportunity as it relates to autonomous or semi-autonomous processing. That may seem, really out of reach, but in reality, it's closer than we think. Gartner, or if you will, industry analysts, are telling us that within a year, or maybe even less, that approximately about 1/5 of our day, or 20% of our workforce, or to some extent 20% of our job is and will be conducted using some level of artificial intelligence. We're not talking about routine processes either. We're talking about non-routine. So being able to do interpretation, to be able to interpret, to be able to apply rules, to be able to apply rules on our behalf, and to some extent take exceptions. So it's important to note that really we're progressing even further and faster, and so reality is certainly upon us by 2020 or by 2022. So next slide, Diane. All right. So if that's really true, and if that challenge is upon us or near in the future, say 2022, what can we do today if you're not there? And how can you start? Where does it make the most sense? How can I take advantage of these services? Because I don't know that my ERP provider is going to write some intelligent document solution. I don't know that, I don't know that my own staff is going to be able to do this. So this is really where we're at today, and kind of speaking to the image integration or document integration. And we believe that it certainly holds a lot of opportunity, especially since we've invested our own time and talent and product efforts. And what we'll demonstrate here briefly is a little bit of what we're doing with the AWS platform and how that integrates well with the solutions that we traditionally offer. I call this the 2020 slide, not necessarily the news broadcast on a Friday evening. Adding another 20 there. Really, what this is saying is why start here? Why would ERP suites go after a document-based process? And maybe even some of you folks are kind of scratching your heads and saying, we've got OCR technologies, and that's been around for a while, and that's kind of proven and a bit scalable. And so what we're actually seeing is not inconsistent with the findings that we're presenting here. Is about, there's about a 20% loss of efficiency, or at least there's some productivity loss associated with processing paper, whether that's receiving it, trying to identify the elements that's important to the organization, and being able to capture it, to get it into the right systems of record. It doesn't necessarily have to be the ERP system, but it could very well be other systems that rely or need that particular set of information that's traditionally contained in paper, processed or traditionally contained in an image, and processed even further. Next bucket is really, it's about a $20 cost savings, or $20 to store and to manage a document. That's about a general consensus. And what that really means is there's a $20 cost reduction, but what I would really say is it's $20 of cash preservation, taking a document out of an organizational hand and not having to deal with either the electronic storage or the paper storage, and issues that tend to come around with compliance and being able to store those documents in a way that don't necessarily expose your organization to some measure of risk. The latter bucket there would be only about 18 to, again, I'll say 20% of companies consider themselves paperless. So what it really means is ERP Suites and our customers are seeing opportunity. Simple as that we can continue down this path and this offering and this product to be able to essentially address those companies that are about 80% still processing paper. The other element I don't think that really makes it on this element of the presentation is not only are these documents coming in, but they're in most cases very content rich. And so not only are there some loss of productivity, but there's also some loss of kind of critical information that aren't necessarily stored in a meaningful way for supporting processes. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be an ERP transaction. Could be for other systems that's looking to consume that additional information. So there is a benefit of capturing this information and being able to store this information for further consumption. All right. All right. So what does this solution look like? So what is the solution? And so what we're really speaking to is, do I really require a cloud migration? Do I need to move my enterprise solutions out of my private data center or out of a private cloud or move it to a public cloud infrastructure? We're not saying that. That's not the intent of this presentation. What we're really saying is we have a solution that works whether it's on premise or whether it's in a private or a public cloud, and our solution works reasonably well with very simple techniques such as email. Such as receiving an image, whether it be an invoice or whether it be a contract abstract or whether it be a certificate of analysis, and being able to process that information either through an email receipt or even through being able to upload it into an ERP Suites portal. That's our application. That's our product. So what we're able to do is upload a document or an image or a series or a batch of documents and images and allow them to be subsequently processed. And ask yourself, well, what kind of documents are we talking about? Took a look at the industry a while back and started to try to understand where can we apply this type of solution. A lot of us have struggled in customer service. We get a lot of repeat orders. We get purchase orders from others. Being able to get that into our system is obviously an element that we could pursue and able to pursue. AP invoices. That's been a traditional track of solutioning over the many years. Being able to process those for payment or for match purposes. Shop floors, whether that be work orders, being able to capture that work order information and then being able then to indicate completion, maybe the quantities created or the quantities result, scrap, things of that nature. Safety data sheets, where do we store the acids and the bases and know the content of what's in our warehouse and what's important to managing that inventory and moving that inventory, fairly critical as well. You can see a whole list of items that we're able to provide. The main point that we're really kind of emphasizing is, unlike some of the point solutions of the past, like OCR or optical character recognition, we are able to process many documents. And those documents can come in many forms, whether they have handwritten notes on them, whether they're structured, and whether they come in multiple languages. And being able to take a document that doesn't necessarily require a template or a pre-processing of that image, and being able to determine or define to the level of automation and telling it what we want to receive, rather instead the image itself will be read and interpreted And in many cases, the solution will learn more and more over time exactly what it is that we're taking from those images, and knowing that we're going to consume downstream, but better yet, to be able to pick up a lot more data elements than we had been able to pick up before in the past. So really the key point of this component or this slide is really indicating any document, in many cases, many styles, and in many different languages, and the ability to differentiate ourselves from traditional OCR processing. Freight bill, as an example, is one that I really like, is because it contains an enormous amount of information. And I've worked with folks that are processing freight bills. They only process a tiny bit of that bill, and knowing those components and being able to capture those elements is pretty critical for cost savings. And so it's a very relevant document, whether you're processing a contract abstract, only plucking away maybe 5-10 elements off your contract abstract or leases, or whether you're plucking it off of your COA or your certificate of authenticity or certificate of analysis. So my point being is I think that's my point made earlier. There's a lot of informational drain on documents, and having a solution like this, we can capture whatever data element that the subscriber is intending to capture, and we can be able to consume that, and we can also be able to search and be able to find that information among our many documents. Next slide, Diane. All right, so let's take a look at our AWS portal. Our solution allows, in this case, is a fairly intuitive, simple user interface. It's not with the intention of being, a high-end user interface. So we're simply getting images in and allowing it to be processed for the data. So my point being is not necessarily make it any more complicated than it needs to be. We can upload files, batch of files, or we can receive files or a batch of files from email. So our image providers can not only send it to say the AP processing at your company, but they can send it to our service, and our service will go ahead and prepare that data, and you'll see subsequently thereafter how we can take that invoice receipt and then subsequently process it for consumption in our ERP package. So the intent here is to kind of illustrate that many documents can be received and many documents can be uploaded, and a couple methods. Okay. All right. So our solution relies heavily on AWS, and a big component of that, or one of many of our components that make this possible, is we're leveraging TextRack services. So we're leveraging a cloud service to perform those interpretation, those learnings, and to prepare the data for us. So it's a big key component. Now, one thing that this slide illustrates to the right is that the main subscriber, or at least the consumer of this information, will be in this case JD Edwards. This could very well be a laboratory system that is collecting and needing some of that COA information. Could very well be an SAP solution. Could very well be an HR solution for something simple as like maybe even behavioral observations or some company forms that are generated through the organization. So it doesn't necessarily have to go to an ERP package, and doesn't necessarily have to go to JD Edwards. So my point there is really illustrating that our product in particular, the heart of which is TextRack, but where it's consumed downstream, in many cases, doesn't matter as much. We can provide and prepare that information across the board. But the main thing is in our case, our customers are largely looking at, say, a JDE instance, and that's something that we do. What I'm going to illustrate here is kind of a fun invoice. I believe a fair amount of folks are interested in AP invoices. And this is one that we created with our own little logo and tried to really create some fun with this particular invoice. And we've got some laundry services being performed on our behalf here at A1A Laundry. And a lot of line items in here. Some of you guys may be familiar with JD Edwards down below. There's an account structure that looks like the journal entry or the equivalent of the account that we would plug it to. There's also a bucket down there if someone would like to put their signature on there and have it read for pre-approval rather than having to go through an approval process. The image could be pre-approved. But in this particular case, what we're illustrating is invoice, and that invoice from the supplier was number 2020. And what we benefit from leveraging these services from Amazon is not only does it read the invoice, but better yet, it collects virtually all the information about the invoice. In this particular case, it came back and said it has interpreted from the invoice with a high degree of confidence, about 99%, that it found the correct invoice data pair and has been able to identify that as 2020. And then the question is, how do we consume that? How can we consume that? And what does that really mean? So having that said, if you go to the next slide, we've successfully integrated this multiple times with EnterpriseOne. It does not necessarily require someone to take a flat file from the service and upload it, run it through the traditional, file services like Z processing or iDocs, things of that nature. What we're really talking about is being able to leverage the REST APIs and being able to take the data generated from a cloud service such as AWS, and then being able to process that back into our transactional systems. And you can see as an example here, our invoice 2020 and not only captured the what was owed to them, but also the related details. And it's kind of fun. You can look a little closer. You can see socks and shoes. But the main point is this is a pretty clear indication that we can integrate pretty seamlessly with E1 and using modern mechanisms rather than the, if you will, the old flat file integrations. So that's not necessarily the case here, folks. We're looking at getting an image in, emailed, receipt, processed, and into our solution. So that's really pretty critical. All right. All right. So once again, we're back at the site in which the images are loaded. You can see in our particular example, we used an invoice, a COA, a freight bill. We actually used some shipments. So the question then is, hey, really, what's happening? What's happening in the back end of the system, and how did it take an image and then subsequently process it? So a little bit of a technical inquiry. At the end of the day, it really produces a result set that we can rely on, again, from a REST API perspective, and being able to take that information and then integrate that back into our traditional ERP packages. So a little bit of a technical view. That's not my intentions today to go into the technical aspect of it, but that's really essentially what it's doing behind the scenes. And then we're able then to consume that thereafter with our subscribing solutions.
And let you take a breath. So why AWS? We are an AWS partner, and AWS is an undisputed leader and undoubtedly in our industry. But we love AWS because of the commitment to innovation, because of the depth and breadth of the services and the way we can combine them in different ways to give our customers what they need. So in this case, why AWS? Because of the greater capacity. Using Textract and the other combined services, we can read and process structured or unstructured data. That's giving us that broader range that Mark talked about beyond just traditional OCR. There's flexibility to add services. So where our solution is a core, a foundation, we have the ability to add additional services on to really get at what your particular business needs. So let's say you need to pull data out, translate it into another language to send it abroad, we can incorporate Amazon Translate. It gives us a lot of room for flexibility. Speed and scalability, you may only have 100 documents, but there is the capacity to go up to 100 or millions of documents in hours. Sky's the limit, so to speak, and you're going to pay by use. Security and compliance, you can rest assured that the solution is validated. So it's HIPAA compliant, SOC, ISO, really all the major compliance requirements that we find our customers need to make sure that they are qualified for are captured here with AWS.
One of the things that Diane kind of points on here a little bit is one thing that's really nice about obviously leveraging a cloud provider. You don't have the usual suspects of having to contemplate hardware and maintenance and license negotiations, and data loss and position of these kinds of assets over time, and it really doesn't become part of your consideration. It doesn't really become, or I'm sorry, it just doesn't really become part of your overall thinking at this point. And so a lot of those kinds of decisions that we would make in the past decade or so, we're really we're looking at the Amazon or the AWS network to be able to take care of the disaster recovery and the database management services, and providing their resources across a broad swatch of responsibilities. So the main point is if you have like an OCR solution in the past, you've had to attend to its database or its license or its OS or all those components, and whether it be virtual or whether it be committed hardware, there's effort and task and distraction. And so in this particular case, not only does AWS provide this for ourselves, but in many cases becomes a platform of the future that, as Diane kind of indicated, we just can't deny its presence in the marketplace. So that was really our go-to strategy right away when we started thinking about how would we deliver the product for those who are interested. Next slide. All right, so what does document automation technically mean? And we've got, I call it two buckets. One is the classic approach, and then the secondary approach would be, well, how does ERP Suites transform this process or this kind of approach? And we can think about it in the terms of AP invoices. We can think about it in terms of really the paperwork that's sitting in, say an advanced ship notice or something like that, that may be received for someone to prepare dock doors. So the main thing is really on the classic side is you're traditionally you're traditionally relying upon an on-prem OCR solution, and that is really being able to take a template, layer that over the image in which it received, extract the components of which you've predefined what you're going to extract from that particular invoice, and that's relevant. Some folks never really had the money and or the commitment to those kinds of solutions, and have pursued shared service centers, have pursued outsourcing the process, have shared a lot, or have taken various degrees of success, and that's fine. I'm not saying that's not without its success. But that OCR product comes with hardware, license, data, as I mentioned earlier. And in many cases, most organizations would call it a point solution. It really simply operates in the AP world. It doesn't necessarily operate outside of the AP world. And so that is kind of fallen its way into, if you will, that classic approach. And as I mentioned, template-based documents. And when all else fails, somebody may very well be just simply entering in manual entries. And that does exist in the marketplace. People repeatedly go in and key in documents manually themselves. What is a transform process, or what does the opportunity really present themselves in our world? So we're looking at a service that's reading on our behalf, capturing on our behalf, and classifying and recognizing the data elements on our behalf, and learning over time and making that even more, and doing that with higher degrees of confidence. It's use-based, so it's not really a committed, the traditional, it's not committed with a fixed cost. Instead, it's a use-based transaction. So there is really no minimum. When you invest in some of your traditional solutions or your classic solutions, you're looking for volume. Over here, as Diane kind of mentioned, it scales all the way from 100 documents to as many as you like. And where our product separates itself from traditional providers is we process any document. We're not necessarily looking for just the usual suspects. We're looking for any document. And I think I've given you guys some examples earlier today. And then obviously being able to take that data and automate its entry into the relevant systems. And with the technologies that we got today, that's a lot easier than it used to be in the past. So to that point, I think that we've got a great response and a great product that can continue to move in that space and even further along. And so the main question then is, and the next slide is, well, hey, I like the idea. How do I translate this into something meaningful for my management team? Or how can I deliver some value? And I'll give you a good example. There was a use case that I did recently where I formulated the numbers on invoice processing, and I compared that against two OCR providers. And I prepared that against our solution. And sitting down and really getting down into the nitty gritty and taking a look at a 3-year analysis and trying to wonder, well, how can we get to the recurring expenses being considerably lower, and how can we get to our transaction costs being considerably lower, and thus how do we generate the highest level of return? Or for that matter, how can we take an investment like this and generate a present value that our management team would generally be interested in investing, or at least certainly worthy of capital consideration. The other point is really to the right is the more what we're really doing is enhancing ERP, or in this case JD Edwards, and essentially reducing, or at least enhancing its capabilities to continue to have a positive impact to the organization. So it kind of gets back to that $20 to store paper or process or manage paper. What we're really talking about is there's a cost opportunity, and we certainly believe our solution addresses that, and we certainly feel like we can get to the numbers that your management team is looking for. And if that is really something, and a little later on is something a little bit more interesting to you and your organization, each case is kind of unique, whether it's getting down to what is the cash impact, or what is the business case to formulate. I think it's critical that, you continue to, contact us or ourselves. We'll continue to work with you in that type of that type of analysis. But so let's just say, let's say it makes sense to you. You'd like to continue to work and see, hey, where do we get started? And that would really be the next slide, Diane, is where do we get started? And, how do we identify those processes or workflows that generally benefit to go paperless? Or where do we have images or documents that have a lot of information we simply aren't capturing, but genuinely need to do some heads down analysis and maybe find some cost opportunity? That's really in that first bucket of being able to identify where there are tasks and workflows that would really either through the process of governance, or where should we start to pay some attention to? And it's really in that identity bucket. Second bucket is what I mentioned earlier, is evaluating. This is where and how can we build the business case that makes the most sense? How can you invest in something like this with a high degree of confidence? Whether you're considering removing your present OCR solution, or whether you're considering adopting one for your first time, or whether it's considering applying these kinds of technologies throughout your organization, not just in one dedicated area. So in that case, we would look at, really where is the value proposition, where is the value opportunity, and how can we address that and build that case for yourselves. Third bucket is what I refer to as we've got 80% of the solution, and this is really in the build phase. But we really need our customers and those interested for the remaining 20%. And what that means is, and you may say, "Well, I just heard you say we got 80% of the solution." What we mean is our solution is very user defined. What you need to do is tell us what images you want to process. What are the data elements that you're looking to take from those images or those documents, and let's start the collection process. So the main thing is really sitting down and defining exactly what these images represent, and what do we want to capture? What do we want to search off of? What do we want to store? And what do we want to integrate downstream? So that's really where that build phase comes in. And then the latter portion is really, how do we benefit from going even further? How can we take, as indicated earlier, how can we take the next step? This is our first step, or your organization's first step, possibly in this area. So how can we begin to build more intelligence, take advantage of more processes that are able to do interpretation and learning, and even further automate some of those subsequent steps thereafter. So it's more of the question is, where can we create some more endearing value to the organization, and really where can we optimize the benefit to you and your team?
We really look at document automation as a strategy. Think of it as a strategy, not a project. It's certainly phase one. You may say you choose invoicing because that's a really hot button for your company. But it's really thinking beyond that and thinking about what you do with even the time saved, the insights gained, and how you can continue to gain momentum from there.
Good point. And essentially, this is really the only the beginning. As I kind of mentioned earlier, in that overall strategy, not just a project, but an overall strategy of how can we begin to adopt essentially a more comprehensive uptake of these technologies and begin to start thinking about the future, which would really be, next slide, Diane, is really how do we begin to shift from those traditional ERP transaction-oriented integrated processes, instead rather look at how much further can we rely upon things such as transformation or digital operations to perform a considerable amount of our work and our workload on our behalf. So once again, industry analysts such as Gartner is saying really within the next 2 years, this is going to be a major cultural shift in mindset. Whether you're in IT or whether you're in the business side, how can we begin to shift the thinking from things that we've been doing for decades, and rather instead let's take up those automations where it makes the most sense, or if you will, take up those process automations or digital assistants or digital operations where it makes clearly the most impact. All right, kind of in wrap here, guys. We kind of started with this conversation. Not only is it a solution, but it's a strategy. It is also getting the mindset and the shift into the organization to understand, the four components that we laid out, whether it's addressing risk or agility or efficiency or customer experience. Is if you were to address risk, the question is, how much is your organization really focused on compliance and preventing fraud? A lot of folks will say, yeah, that occurs. But if your head's down and 20% of your workday is wasted on paper, that's 20% that we can begin to apply that to broader challenges such as risk. Next one could very well be addressing agility. Is OCR, again, in the past had been a fantastic point solution, but what we're talking about is multiple documents throughout your organization, and being able to treat that like a true source of data, almost like a file of information rather than a piece of paper. So being able to process not just one type, but multiple types of documents throughout your organization. In terms of gaining efficiency, as we kind of spoke earlier, there's approximately a lot of folks are committed to inefficient processes, and in this particular case, is how can we take those folks and free them up to work more on the exceptions and really work on the process itself rather than specifically on the document or on the transaction at hand. In this particular case, is really taking those valuable resources in our organization and being able to work to the left and being able to work right of them and within their own sphere of influence, and being able to create more efficiency, whether that's perfecting the purchase order or the receipt process, or perfecting the invoice from your supplier, being able to then subsequently get additional insights, additional understandings, like in the AP world, your valuable resources in AP could very well be more valued in the treasury role. How can we perform more cash management responsibilities and cash preservation responsibilities rather than cash processing and payment processing? Next would be more of improving the customer experience. And that experience could be internal, could be external. Could be to the left or to the right, or could be inside or external of your organization. So the main thing is not only are you getting data from these sources of information, but you're also gaining some insights into what, how you're transacting within or without, or I'm sorry, outside of your org. So being able to then take that and to be able to carefully and be able to generate insights is also pretty critical. So it's not only is it speaking to a transaction today, but it's really speaking to a broader set of capabilities that I think are upon us today, or at least certainly relevant in many organizations within the next few years. What we're really conveying today with our product and with these offerings is machine learning, intelligent cloud services, and being able to integrate them with our traditional ERP packages, they're simply reality. It's not something that we were talking about 5 years ago, 10 years ago. We're talking about this is something that we are capable of doing today. We're not projecting. We're not simply going out and telling you that we can. We're saying we are, and that's critical. The other element is our EnterpriseOne or E1 solution is perfectly compatible with cloud services. Whether the tool sets that Oracle has been able to deliver over the past few years and the capabilities at that layer of the application has been expanded dramatically. So we are able to do far more than we were able to do a decade ago with these kinds of services. And I kind of mentioned earlier, it's not about migrating your data center to a cloud or a private cloud or even use the term cloud. What it's really saying is we have the ability to take services out there that operate traditionally in a cloud environment and being able to integrate that with our ERP package, whether it's on-prem or whether it's private or whether it's public cloud. So that's given us the flexibility that we'd like. I mentioned earlier, economics are simply compelling. When you start looking at the cost associated with solutions from the past and what these are representing and the scale by which the cost is really identified. The simple fact is it's a fairly easy thing for a guy like myself who's very numbers oriented to really focus on where the productivity gains are, where the costs are, and where we can find a good compelling business case. So I really like the third bullet because I like presenting a scenario where yourself and ourselves are generating genuine value. So that's pretty important. I'll give Diane the last two bits there if you like.
All right, I'll jump in. The opportunities are rich. We talked about that early on and laid those out, and the tools obviously exist. But when you say things like machine learning, it certainly comes across as daunting for most of us. So that's what we're here for, to help you build a roadmap, not just implement a product. So with that, let's talk about our ways to get started. You can join our early adopters, take advantage of special pricing, and help us continue to refine the product on its onset. Set up a virtual workshop to evaluate your documents. Maybe you're not sure which would be the best, which would deliver the best ROI to really make a good impression right out of the gate with your management team. We'll sit down with you, Mark will sit down with you, and Bill help you build out a business case, help you address all of that. And then certainly follow us for updates. Maybe you're not ready to get started right now, or maybe you're just curious what other types of products could integrate and continue to help with the process improvement. Follow us on all our social channels, and we're constantly talking about new features and new products as they roll out, new services. So here's Mark's contact information. If there's a question you had, if you wanted to dig in a little bit deeper to that 3-year analysis on the cost analysis on the invoice case, use case specifically, and also Dan Coyne. If you aren't as familiar with ERP Suites, maybe you don't have a favorite salesperson or account manager that you're used to working with, give Dan a call. He's our cloud specialist, all things AWS, and very familiar with the product too, and he can get you started on some of those things. So I appreciate your time today, all, and don't hesitate to follow up if a question occurs to you after the fact. Again, we'll send out a recording so you can revisit this, and thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Everybody have a wonderful day.